So this study made its splash all across the internet because it was kind of designed to, it would seem. ChatGPT is making you dumber. It's ruining our brains and our cognitive processes. And I know you saw this floating around, Perry. We both posted it on the little board we use for submitting potential stories.
Yeah, I did. And it's one of those things that I think everybody resonates with, like even if they use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and they enjoy it and they're positive about it. Every now and then you wonder, am I using it too much? Am I maybe losing some of my creativity or turning to it too early? And so I think a lot of people wanted to like invest in that and understand what the potential risks and dangers are.
I mean, it does sound a lot like whenever any new technology comes out, like smartphones, where we're like, oh, our smartphone's making us dumber. Is the written word making us dumber? Things like that. And as you look deeper and deeper at this study, it kind of falls apart into that. So we'll start just by covering what the study was, like what they did, what was the experiment. They took 3 groups. One group was assigned to use an LLM for this task. One group was only allowed to use Google search. And then one group was only allowed to use just their own brains. There was 18 participants in each of those groups, so 54 total. An LLM group, a Google search group, and only brains. They each did 3 sessions of essay writing based on SAT test prompts. So you had this one group using LLMs to help them write SAT prompt essays. One group was allowed to use Google search, and one group only used their brains. And then there was a critical 4th session where the brain and LLM groups switched, and then the brain-only people got to use an LLM to write an essay, and the LLM people got to use only their brains. We'll get to that 4th session in a little bit because that's actually kind of a problem in the design of the experiment because they leave out a whole group. The Google search group gets dropped off. And at that point, it was only 18 people. And because it's the cross comparison, that really is only an N of 9 because it'd be halved.
Right.
So focusing on just those first 3 sessions of essay writing. You have the LLM group, the Google search group, and the only brain group. And they basically found the most predictable thing ever, which is that the more you use an external tool, the less you use your brain. Because the whole crux of this study hinged on measuring brain activity while these participants did these essays. At first you can say, oh yeah, less brain use when you're using an LLM. Obviously, there's less brain use when you're using an LLM. You're not using the connections in your brain in the same way you would if you had to generate every piece of information from inside of your brain.
Yeah, it's like if you're doing your taxes with a calculator versus just your head as well, right? I do have one question that maybe you can fill in some information. So you had those 4 test groups. Had they done something to where like they're conditioning people to use those tools or only their brains for like a month or something, or was it just isolated sessions?
No, it was cold, and it was also a lot of the people in the LLM group had never used ChatGPT before either. So
it doesn't really measure true dependency or habit then.
Yeah, it doesn't at all. It was like this isolated, very cold experiment, and the conclusions they tried to draw is sort of the biggest problem I have with it, where they tried to point to some sort of cognitive debt, cognitive decline, and all of this, and like students won't perform as well. In reality, when you look at the experiment just holistically, it's basically saying if you use an LLM to write an essay, you don't really know what's in the essay as well as someone who wrote the whole thing from their brain. So you feel less ownership from it. You have a harder time quoting from it, and you're less familiar with the source material because, of course, you used an AI to write it. But they try and say that extrapolating from that is going to lead to some massive cognitive decline, when in reality, this was like an isolated study. And also, it's kind of bizarre to even bring in a brain scan for this kind of thing anyway. It just seems like a way to make it seem more scientific than it is.
Well, I mean, if I had a brain scan machine, I'd be trying to use it anywhere I could.
Right.
But
this is MIT.
The thing I'm wondering for this is it seems like there should have been some kind of vetting on the front end or habituation on the front end where you'd say, hey, if you use LLMs for everything, come join this study. We want to throw you in this group. If you've never used an LLM, we'll throw you in a group for this study. They've not done that. So one of the potential wrong outcomes that could happen is that those 18 people, some of which who have never used an LLM that are in the LLM group, for them, it's all about the tool use. because they're going, oh, I've got this new thing. I've got to learn how to use it right now. And so the implementation becomes about how do I apply this tool to this task rather than how do I fulfill the task to the best of my ability.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure you remember when you first got to play with like ChatGPT when that was first coming on the scene. You were like, oh, this can do so much. Like it can just come up with so much text. It seems really smart. You don't really know the shortcomings until you've had more experience with it. So
exactly.
They discovered that the group that was using the LLM had the lowest amount of brain activity. The group using Google search had heightened activity in like the visual cortex and stuff, which makes sense because they're looking and scanning for pieces of information to include, and then higher brain activity as they synthesize that into their writing. And then the brain group had the highest because they had to do everything using just their brain. So it's really a measure of cognitive offloading that they tried to spin as cognitive decline. And that, I think, is really kind of dishonest and weird. And then also this is like a little side tangent, but I'll slip it in right here. There was posts going around. Someone tagged me on Blue Sky saying, did you see this? Where they were talking with the authors of the study about how they put like quote unquote AI traps in the study to catch people who were like summarizing it with AI and reading about the results. Which I was like, oh, cool. That's fun. That's neat. I thought that was cool.
Interesting.
But then I looked at the only example I could find of them mentioning that. And they were like, yeah, people are saying they only got to use ChatGPT 4.0. And we didn't say that anywhere in the study. But if you look at the study, it does say that somewhere like down at the bottom. It lists that was the version that the students were using. So like, what are we doing here? Like, I just don't understand what we're doing here. So before I just keep plowing
I'm wondering
forward,
if that study's going to get retracted at some point. That it seemed really exciting, was going to catch some news, and now people are going to find some fatal flaws in it that need to be addressed before that gets put back out in the world.
When it wasn't peer reviewed, it was pre-review and all of this other stuff too. Like, and it acknowledges that in the paper, but it doesn't. That doesn't stop reporting. You know, in the landscape we have now. I don't really think the authors had like malicious intent or anything like that. It just seems not well thought out, not well designed, and like they did this study that proved a very obvious thing that the more you use a tool, the less you use your brain, and then decided to say that that would like lead to decreased outcomes with students, which like makes me frustrated because we do have real problems in education with people using AI to cheat at stuff and not be engaged in learning materials, and those are like actual big systemic problems that we need to address. And like this just ain't it. And like first, just there's so many different articles like from The Times, using ChatGPT for work, it might make you stupid. There's articles from The Telegraph, using AI makes you stupid, researchers find. You can find an endless list of articles saying like ChatGPT is making you dumb, which is not what this study really found. The study has its own page, brainonllm.com. We'll link to all of this, where they talk about what they did, and they even like they acknowledge some of these shortcomings, but this is the bit from their page that bugged me. As the educational impact of LLM use only begins to settle with the general population, in this preliminary study, we demonstrate the pressing matter to explore further any potential changes in learning skills based on the results of our study. That's like a word soup. But the use of LLM had a measurable impact on our participants, and while the benefits were initially apparent, as we demonstrated over the course of 4 sessions, which took place over 4 months, the LLM group's participants performed worse than their counterparts in the brain-only group at all levels, neural, linguistic, and scoring. Now, when they say performed worse, they're talking about ownership and brain activity and things like that. They have this table of results where they break down the LLM group, the search engine group, and the brain-only group, and like rank them based on what the contents of their essay and the results of the brain scans and whatnot. And it just boils down to exactly what you'd think. Like, the search engine group surfaced a lot of contents in their essays that you would expect to find at the top of Google searches, things that would be impacted by SEO and stuff like that. They also found common repeated patterns and phrases among the group that used the search engines, also the group that used the LLMs, because again, these are surfacing unoriginal texts that you are then using as source material, obviously. And then the brain-only group has the like shortest essays, high perceived ownership, high quoting ability, more concise essays, lower on accuracy, scored by an AI judge and human teachers in the group, but robust increases in connectivity in all bands in their brain, and the distance between essays written in the brain group is always significant and high compared to LLM or search engine groups, because again, they are not sourcing unoriginal material and like synthesizing it to something else that's coming only from them.
Is the takeaway, though, that the people that used their brains, they had shorter, more concise essays that were also more wrong?
Yeah, and they were more different from each other. So when they say performs better or performs worse, like that's what they're talking about. This whole thing is just a bad study.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. Now, of course, if you have access to search and you have access to tools, you're going to find more credible material to bring in. Credible, we can put in quotes, depending, because it's all can be gamed. But that is interesting that one of the findings that they didn't trumpet is that people that are only using their brain are going to have more inherent flaws within the essays that they produce as well. That could be another headline that comes out of it.
I mean, yeah, it could if that was the way that it was like chosen to be spun. But the thing is, like,
right.
This seems like an experiment designed to be spun because there's no real reason to bring in brain scans for what is so clearly a behavioral finding. You know what I mean? Like, what is the EEG machine really doing here besides showing brain activation levels?
Yeah, I mean, it would be really, I guess it could be the way I would look at it if I was trying to prove something with it is that the brain-only group, you're measuring somebody that has no access to tools. So it is all going to be brain. When you're showing the search engine tools, you're looking at an iterative kind of participatory process of, oh, it's this. Well, maybe I can change my search and do this. If they're seeing way less cognitive activity on the LLM, it may mean that they're trusting the LLM inherently more than like search. And because what I would hope for is that you get about the same engagement that you do as search, is that there's this more iterative participatory process rather than just, oh, it gave me this.
Right. And like that is, again, with people's, a lot of their participants not being familiar with ChatGPT, right? You don't know how to use it effectively. It doesn't really talk about using the tool effectively. And it does indicate that people are likely to just trust its output and take its output and not really read and process and internalize a lot of the stuff that they're reading from the AI because they're hooked up to an EEG machine and told to write an SAT test prep essay using this tool. What do you expect to find? It's just super not realistic. There's actually a great, and I just found this morning because I was looking to see if anyone had a take that I found more reasonable. I don't agree with this author entirely all the way through this write-up, but we'll link it. It's from Decision Intelligence on Substack, tearing apart this study. And this person has some relevant experience, and they highlight some of the issues as well. And since we're out of time in this segment, definitely recommend checking that out if you're more curious. But yeah, that study was kind of a pile of nothing. That is not to say that AI is smart or will make you smarter or that it knows everything, because obviously, I hope if you listen to the show, you know that AI doesn't even know what truth is. And that's what we're talking about in the very next segment. Stick around.
Absolutely.